Canada's defense minister sat down today with his NATO counterparts to talk ISIL and other security matters in Eastern Europe. It was the first contact since the Trudeau government announced the new role for Canada in the conflict. Here's what Harjit Sajjan had to say earlier today.
No, our commitment was to the coalition in fighting Daesh, and I've done a very thorough assessment with the military and speaking with the coalition. And the best way to take the fight to Daesh is being able to train the local security forces, and that's what we're doing. And we're using all the right capability, not just our special forces, but our other troops as well. And that's what we committed to, and that's exactly what we're doing now.
Well, reaction continued to rumble for and against the end to aerial combat over Syria and Iraq as Canada's military shifts into a training and advising role. Another prominent name came out swinging against the change earlier today. Kevin O'Leary is chair of O'Leary Financial, a CTV commentator and potential Conservative leadership candidate. All right, Kevin, I want you to put on your potential leadership hat for a moment. Interim leader Ron Ambrose says pulling our jets out of Syria violates our principles, calls it shameless, a betrayal of our allies. You disagree. Why?
I disagree because we have something in Canada that's unique globally. We have an asset that many people don't understand. We have the moral authority, the moral right, and a constituency in the Middle East to be peacekeepers that we earned in the 60s and the 70s in many places like the island of Cyprus or in Jordan or in Syria. Canadian soldiers, some of the most highly trained soldiers on earth, even from the 60s, are considered to be peacekeepers because people trust them. And certainly to gain that trust and to get that moral authority took decades and decades. We share that with the Finnish people. For us to all of a sudden decide that we're going to start killing people and sharing in destruction and death when we already have the moral right to be peacekeepers, a unique situation that every country would honor. And I can guarantee you that if you asked an ISIS fighter, the last person he wants to put a bullet into is a Canadian. Believe me, we have such moral authority as peacekeepers. Why would we waste it and declare our interest in bombing people when we could actually keep the peace? I'd much rather do that. And I think what we're doing in proposing becoming allies and people that actually don't want to do this. Most Canadians would rather be peacekeepers than create war. Killing people is easy. Keeping the peace is very hard.
But as a policy statement or as a principle, surely you know this won't wash with the Conservatives that took great pride in becoming peacemakers as opposed to peacekeepers. How are you going to square that circle?
I don't care if it squares with the Liberals, the Green Party, the Conservatives. It squares with the Canadian people. That's what matters. If you ask 10 Canadians, would they rather be global peacekeepers, or would they rather be warmongers? I know their answer. And I'm one of them. I know that we have the moral authority and the right in a unique situation, the trust of the world to keep the peace. I want to keep that as an asset of Canada.
I'm sorry, Kevin. I'm going to challenge you on this one point, though. Do you think that ISIS would actually pause for a moment if they saw a blue helmet in the field? They'd still put a bullet through that blue helmet. They'll put a bullet through a kid's head. Are they really going to say, oh, it's Canadian, let's not shoot them?
No. Here's what I'm talking about. Here's the reality. Here's the practical reality on the ground. There's about 40,000 maniacs that call themselves ISIS right now that are keeping millions of people in terror and in a horrible situation in Syria. At some point, after they've been disposed of, somebody has to keep the peace. It's the hardest job there is, and it's not without peril. Peacekeepers get killed a lot. It's horrible, but you have to be somebody that has the trust of both sides. I'm not saying this is an easy task, but if there's one country on earth that could pull it off, that is going to have to do this, it's going to be Canadians. And I think we should keep that option open because the world is going to need us as peacekeepers after we've finally destroyed, as a coalition, the ISIS. Because there's not that many of them. They're going to burn themselves out anyways, as every war does. Then the hard work begins. Then who's going to keep the peace? Right. Canadians can do that. Okay. If we keep our option open, That's what I'm saying.
Okay, I want to switch channels a little bit on this one, and you made a name for yourself internationally as an investor, and I'm curious what you think about the National Bank of Canada. It came out today with a report saying there's a huge need for fiscal stimulus. The Canadian economy needs it badly, and they're projecting we could see up to a $90 billion deficit over 4 years. Crazy talk to you?
That's beyond crazy. That's absurd. The Canadian economy cannot take a $90 billion deficit. There's no way the Canadian government has the ability to spend $90 billion. That's impossible. If we actually even said that to the world, if that was even considered an economic reality, we'd be growing bananas in February here. The Canadian dollar would completely collapse, and we would be a banana republic overnight. We can't even sustain a $30 billion deficit. A $10 billion deficit is why the Canadian currency has collapsed in value. Listen, the government of Canada has no track record of spending that kind of money on infrastructure or anything else. Look at the disasters in the province of Ontario in energy plants alone. Look at the disasters in the 70s when the government tried to build the Olympic facilities. You can't do it. You need the private sector to deploy that capital. There's no way for the government to spend that kind of money. That's absurd.
Okay, we got that clear. One final question, if I could. Donald Trump won last night, a victory for the anti-establishment outsiders. Does that motivate you to think more seriously about a leadership bid?
You know, it's funny that I've been actually compared to Donald Trump, and yes, there's some similarities regarding reality business television. He on The Apprentice and I on Shark Tank. But that's where the similarity ends. He has much better hair than I have. There's no question about that. And I'm Lebanese Irish. I don't build walls. I wouldn't be here if we built walls in Canada. I'm an inclusive. I want Canada to remain what it is, one of the most interesting and dynamic societies on Earth, the envy of the planet Earth. Most people wish they could fly the Canadian flag. Let's face it, we're the envy of the world. It's just that we have our fiscal and economic policy is a mess because we have poor leadership and actually all the way to incompetent leadership in that area. And I think Canadians are tired of it. So from a populist point of view, I think you're seeing a lot of frustration in Canada between the policies of the feds, even though it's a brief tenure so far, it's a fail. Let's say our Prime Minister went and spent $4.2 billion in the first 60 days and didn't create one incremental Canadian job. I think Canada woke up and said, whoa, what's he doing?
Sounds a bit like a leadership speech to me, but let us know when you're taking French lessons, Kevin O'Leary. Appreciate you coming on the show. Talk to you again soon.
Take care. Bye-bye.